Hello, I'm Nancy Heinel, the organist and choir director here at St. John's Episcopal Church. As a lot of you already know, we are embarking on a wonderful new adventure. We're going to have our organ restored. In 2 years, it'll be 100 years old, and we are really excited about the fact that it will sound glorious again. And here today with us is Mark Steiner. And Mark is going to be the gentleman who will be doing the restoration. And in a couple of days, next week, he's going to be taking the organ completely out, taking it back to his warehouse in Hagerstown, where he will be working on it. So I thought today would be a good time to introduce you to Mark and let him tell you a little bit about himself.
Good. Thank you very much, Nancy.
You're welcome.
So I'm delighted to have been chosen by the vestry here at St. John's to be able to rebuild your Muller organ. I had the great pleasure 4 years ago of playing for the wedding of your rector to my very good friend Daniel Weatherholt. And so that was my first opportunity to be able to get to know the organ of St. John's, to play for a very packed service and a very wonderful service that day. Nancy and I had met about that same time, and she said, there are a few things on the organ you might need to know. And in my practice before your rector's wedding, I found out very quickly a few things, and Nancy said, if you want that to work, you're welcome to get it to work, but that hasn't worked since I've been here. So we are going to try in a few minutes to go into the organ chamber, and I know you've had your first video, which was delightful. And this time around, what we're going to do is, between Nancy and Daniel's hiding off on the sides here, Weatherholt, he will be, and Nancy hopefully will be playing a few things, and I have my treble light hanging in there, and so hopefully you'll be able to see a few things while the organ is on. While I'm standing here though, I would like to invite anyone that will be watching this video that, as Nancy mentioned, next Tuesday, June the 1st, my crew and I will be down here, and the organ, the way it looks right now, will not look like that next week. On Tuesday morning, the day after Memorial Day, we will be removing the entire organ to our shop. And if you all are in the neighborhood of St. John's Episcopal in Kingsville, please stop in. This only occurs about once every 50 or 60 years. And so I know for myself that I won't do it again in 50 or 60 years unless by some miracle the fountain of youth comes to my drinking water.
Can you share?
And I will share with you all. So what will happen if you do choose to come, and I do invite you to come, is that the glorious church here at St. John's will look like a storage shed. And the reason is that during the removal of the organ, every piece of the organ will come out, and then a 24-foot truck that I'll be renting in Cumberland and bringing to here will be loaded, and hopefully by the end of next week it'll all be loaded. And the reason it all has to be loaded is because worship services occur in here, and it needs to go from a storage facility to a house of worship again, minus the organ. So what I would like to do, if my videographer could follow along with me here, is what we would like to do is to go more in depth than the first video. And this is a real get in and show you things that are going on. The last time was a little difficult because it was hard to find lighting in there. One of the things that will occur during the restoration project is that modern LED lighting will be put in the organ chamber. I am meeting with an electrician that the church uses next week. We will bring the organ up to 21st century codes, because most of what was in here, as Nancy mentioned, is close to 100 years old. And if my videographer's camera can get in close enough, I will be delighted to show you up close what 100-year-old technology looks like. In some cases, it's fascinating. In other places, it's a little scary, because when you see some of the wiring in there, we probably will wonder, how did St. John's survive? But as any old building, and regular updates occur with buildings and organs, old wiring is something that it needs to be updated. So, with permission of my videographer, we're going to slowly walk into the organ chamber, and we'll show you a few things that are going on in there with the organ on. All right. Before you come in, if you can, stay there. Could you focus up on these louvers that are up here? And I will show you those, because that's one thing that's going to occur. If you noticed right now, and if you're familiar with St. John's, the organ is in the chancel, the front of the church. It's on the left-hand side of the church. And most of you in the congregation probably don't look up here on a regular basis other than to see your rector, which you should be doing. But if you ever look over to the side and you see your music director, when she needs to get to the volume louder and softer, she pushes a pedal on this big thing called a console, and these wooden louvers called swell shades open and close. And what they do is that the organ is a wind-blown instrument, and it can't get any louder or softer other than taking some of the stops, which we'll show you in there. But if you want to make it louder and softer, you can also open and close those louvers. And when they're open, it lets the sound that is in the organ chamber behind me, it lets the sound out into the church. And one of the things we'll be doing during our restoration is these wooden louvers here have felt on them right here, and the felt's 100 years old, and maybe a few moths over the years have munched on them. So all of that felt will be torn off, and brand new felt will be put on, and it'll give the moths new material to start eating on. And in addition, these swell shades will be painted again, so they'll look like they did new 100 years ago. So I thought I would just show you. Luckily, your last video talked a lot about the console, and I don't think there's anything else I can add. So, if my videographer and I could wander into the organ chamber, and if I can find the other organist here at St. John's, Daniel Weatherholt, and get him to man the console for me, I'm going to ask him after we get in there to play a few things. So, let's wander into the organ chamber. Okay, so we are now in the organ chamber. One of the things that I mentioned to you is that the organ chamber here, which is actually the church has two sort of crosses on the basic structure. The one on the right is where the sacristy, where the clergy and ministers get ready. The one on the left is where this organ chamber is right now. And I'm going to turn my trouble light off for a minute, and if you can notice, there is just one light in this organ chamber, and the very back of the organ chamber, and I hope it shows up just as dark as it will, you'll notice that there is no lighting in the back part of the chamber. And one of the things we're going to be doing is we will be removing every piece of the organ, and while the organ is out of here, your local electricians will be putting me in lighting so that when we come to work on the organ, service it on a regular basis, we will have actually lighting that will light up the whole chamber other than just one light, which is right above me now. Now to follow up a little on your first video, this big thing right here that I've got my hand on is called a wind chest. And this is what the organ, all the pipes that Daniel so wonderfully described on your last video, you can see now there are different sets of pipes called stops. And if Daniel's at the console, I'm going to have him from the back to the front play the ranks so you can hear just some quick things. And Daniel, what I'm going to ask you to do on either keyboard, and you can just play a few chords on each one. If you can play me a chord on either the gedeckt or the stop diapason, that is the rank that's right here. It has a black thing on top called a stopper. And so Daniel, if you could play me just a few chords on the gedeckt or the stop diapason on either keyboard, that would be delightful. Okay, moving down by the ranks, this little thing that separates here, this is called a rackboard. This is one rank. So the next rank down is a stop called an oboe, which is on the upper keyboard. So Daniel, if you could play me a few things on the oboe stop, which is right here. And the oboe, even though it's original, is actually going to be replaced in this restoration with a real oboe sounding stop, because this is what they call a labial oboe, which means it's a string pipe that makes the sound. We're going to put a real oboe that has a moving tongue in it. And so, moving along, a very soft rank is called the dulciana, and that's the this is the third rank there. So Daniel, if you could play a little bit on the dulciana. Okay, moving down, there's a thing called a viole. And so Daniel, if you could play me, the viole is a string stop. So if you could play me the viole. And the viole has a matching rank that goes with it that's tuned slightly out of tune on purpose, called a celeste. So Daniel, if you could play just one chord or so on the viole again, and then would you add the celeste to that and play some chords? So what Daniel did is he played the viole rank, which was here, and then skipping over this one, he played this one, which was called the celeste. So he played this and this together, and that gave him that little wavy sound. Another rank that is on this main chest up here is an open wooden flute, and I'll pull one out so you can see. Unlike the stopped one, this is completely open at the top, and this little metal flap is how you tune it. And I'll put that pipe back in. So Daniel, if you could play me something on the, I think it's called the flute traverse. So you've heard some things that imitate the orchestra. You've heard some strings here. You've heard some flutes. The one stop on an organ that is really peculiar to organs is called the diapason. And the diapason is the rank that sounds like the churchy sound. So Daniel, if you could play me, the diapason is right here. Could you play me a chord on the diapason? Very good. Now, you'll notice there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there are 7 different stops or ranks on the main chest here. And so you've heard all of those. against the back wall there is a very large pipe called the Borden, and that produces the low pitches on the organ. And Daniel, could you just play me a few notes anywhere on the 16-foot Borden? Very good. And you notice the Borden starts here, and it's about 9 feet long from way up there to down here, and then it goes way back into the dark recesses and then comes down here. Now, a real tricky little one is up behind us, and you may not be able to see this, there is another chest way up on top up there. And Daniel, could you play me a few things on the mixture on the grate? The mixture is the littlest pipes that you see in the organ up there, and the mixture is 2 sets of pipes put together. One plays the normal rank and the other one plays a 5th higher. So what it does is it gives you, that's what the mixture is, it gives you 2 different sounds. And then behind the mixture is the only reed that's in the organ now, and it's called a trumpet. So Daniel, could you play me something on the trumpet? Great. So, if you count all your ranks up, you start here, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there are 11 different sets of pipes in the organ. Around 500 to 600 pipes are in here. Now, one of the main things that we'll be doing, in addition to taking all these pipes out and restoring all of these pipes, which means repairing all the metal that you see up there, cleaning all the wood, putting new leather on the stoppers, which I now have paper towels in. Why? I have the roll there. This is not regulation organ quality here, but it'll keep the stopper in place until I put New Zealand sheepskin back on. And then looking underneath of the organ, there's some leather here on what they call a reservoir. And you can see that leather is starting to come off. When that comes off, the air will no longer stay in there. We will be replacing all of this leather here with all brand new leather. And then if you look further back in there, Daniel, could you close the swell shades for me and open them again? If you see that thing in the back moving, that's the motor that controls the swell shades that we talked about earlier. And then over in this corner is some of the very ancient electrical work. There are 2 boxes here close to me. That's what turns the blower on. And then you may be able to hear a fairly loud hum coming from that. We're trying to see if we can get that upgraded so we don't have that loud hum. And then that little black box that's next to it that says Orga Electra on it is what provides, the organ runs on DC current, like a car battery, and that black box you see provides the DC current. And that's going to be replaced with a solid state rectifier, because we'll be putting new equipment in here, so it needs a more stable current. And then if you look way back in the chamber, you'll see pipes on the floor back there. That chest and those pipes will be restored. And then around the corner, which I'm not going to make the rector crawl in there because it would be really hard to get in there with a camera, there are wooden big pipes back in the corner back there. And we're going to be taking those out, restoring those, and then putting it all back. So, I can ask my videographer to stand up again, and hopefully this will work.
Quick question from your videographer.
Yes.
The current blower. Can
Yes.
you show us where that is?
I will be very glad to show you that. And if your videographer doesn't make it through here, we are going to stop. Right now, it may look like my videographer, your rector, and I are going into the deep recesses, and down there is where the blower is located. Okay. All right. So, close that back up. One of the things that we're going to do is the blower is located actually in a crawl space under the organ chamber. And seeing all the droppings that I've seen in here, I can pretty well assume that this big, lovely cemetery, all the things that live out there have come in, and now some live downstairs with the blower. One of the things the church decided to do is, because the blower is in a crawl space under the organ chamber on the dirt floor, we are going to put a new silent blower in, which will be located up here, and the old blower is going to stay down there so that all of the things that want to live in it are welcome to live in it. And this lovely little trap door, which lets things in, is going to be sealed off so that nothing that is outside and in there may come in here. While we're here, if you'll notice down here on the floor is some of this lovely wiring from 1924. And in 1924, it was perfectly acceptable, but this is what they call cotton-coated wiring, and when it gets old, it frays. Although it probably can't cause a fire, it probably isn't a real good idea to have bare wire touching bare wire. We will be replacing all of the wiring with plastic-coated cable, which is now the only acceptable way to do things. So that's one of our jobs. And then, I don't know if my videographer can look, but this is the bottoms of all this. Every one of these screws will have to come unscrewed, and all the mechanism that is inside of there will be all taken out. Most of it's going to be replaced with newer magnets and things, because the electric that's inside of there and the leather is all, it's been redone, but it's all at least 50, 60 years old. And like some of the leather you've seen, this inside of here, there's thousands of pieces of leather. A lot of that's going to be renewed or replaced with something, and that's why the organ does have some of the dead notes that it has right now. So as you can see, all of this, all the way back into here, and all of this will all have to come out. And so when you come in to see this, hopefully next week, all of this will be laying on blankets in the pews in the church for several days before it goes and lives in Cumberland for the summer and all gets cleaned and renewed. So that's pretty much what we've got to do, is we've got to take all of this out next week and take it all back to my shop in Cumberland in Western Maryland, and we will set all of this up and test it. Now my ceiling isn't anywhere near as high as this, so when I set it up in my shop, we'll set all of this back up again, and we'll have the console playing it, but we probably won't have any pipes in. My ceiling is about 9 feet high. So that's our organ chamber. So if my videographer, who's done a magnificent job, we'll walk back out here. The console, which you've already heard about, which Daniel's seated at, this will come out first next week. And again, it has old wiring in it, and it's got air bellows inside of there. All of that will be redone with a computer-based system, and what will run from here to here is just one Ethernet cable, which will be, the computer is in here, it will speak to the encoder in there. It'll still look like this. It'll still look like a traditional organ console, but inside, instead of having all the big bellows which are leaking right now, that'll all be replaced with a computer. And so that's pretty much the extent of our work here, and that's what takes so long, because you can see a lot of it has to be cleaned, repaired, updated, tested, and then brought back to Kingsville. So that's our job for next week. So.